California laws allowed a 19-year-old to be charged for a murder he didn't commit. He was essentially in the wrong place at the wrong time, but more than that, failures of the justice system and his court-appointed legal counsel led to his wrongful conviction. Those laws have since changed, but the relief came too late for Zachary Vanderhorst, who spent decades in prison before his conviction was overturned.
In February 2020, Zachary Vanderhorst walked out of prison a free man for the first time in over 45 years. At age 19, he pleaded guilty to murder and rape, crimes he did not commit, after his public defenders pressured him to take a plea deal.
I'm not angry, but I'm suffering when I try to relive it. And it's not suffering because I've done something wrong. It's suffering because they done something wrong to me. And I haven't figured out how to heal it up yet. But I ain't gonna let it break me.
Zachary grew up in the Fillmore projects of San Francisco, with dreams of becoming a drummer or watch repair expert. But he never got the chance to pursue those dreams. Like other young men growing up in the projects in the 60s and 70s, Zachary got involved with the wrong crowd, started doing drugs, and got hooked on heroin.
Heroin being one of the most insidious drugs known to man, it only seems like days until you're hooked. You're not turned on any longer.
I accidentally stumbled up on one day snorting some heroin. When a friend was not knowing exactly what I was doing, but just trying to be, hang out with the best. And from that point on, I was addicted to heroin.
On September 12, 1974, Zachary was having a hard time finding a fix to stave off the symptoms of heroin withdrawal. His friend David Carter told him if he wanted money for heroin, he'd have to help him rob a house.
Now you're driven to things you would never have considered heretofore by your insatiable need for the drug.
Zachary agreed to help Carter rob a home on Fell Street in San Francisco. While Zachary was in the front living room, wrapping up a TV set, his friend was on the back porch, where he shot and killed a man, 39-year-old Alan MacArthur. Zachary, who was unarmed, didn't hear the gunshot and didn't believe Carter when he told him he'd just shot someone, until he saw it on the news the next day.
This is Channel 4's Newswatch, the Bay Area's most complete, up-to-the-minute presentation of local...
Police later arrested Zachary and charged him with murder. A California law at the time allowed anyone who took part in a crime like robbery, where a killing occurred, to be prosecuted for murder, even if they didn't personally kill or intend to kill anyone.
Zachary was not only charged with the felony murder, but he was charged with special circumstances. And the district attorney said that they were going to seek the death penalty. And that is basically what set the train in motion for this horrific guilty plea.
That's Rebecca Young, who helped get Zachary's convictions overturned when she worked as an attorney for the public defender's office. Young now investigates police shootings and police misconduct for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. In 2018, Young served on a committee that helped change California's felony murder rule so that defendants like Zachary can no longer be charged with murder based solely on the actions of an accomplice. Here's California State Senator Nancy Skinner speaking about the law, Senate Bill 1437, before it was passed in 2018.
In California, you can literally be charged with murder and convicted of murder and then sentenced for life without committing murder and without even being present at the time of the crime.
Young first learned of Zachary's case when he asked her office for help filing a petition for resentencing under the new law. He told Young how frustrated he was that his requests for parole kept getting denied while other inmates who had committed multiple murders were getting out on parole.
And so I responded and I said, perhaps part of your difficulty in obtaining parole was due to the fact that you had these other robberies and a rape that you pled guilty to. And he said, but I didn't do those crimes. And I said, but you pled guilty to them. And he said, yes, my lawyer told me it was part of the package and that I had to plead to them. And I just thought, this can't possibly be right.
Zachary was not only charged for taking part in the September 12th robbery, where a man was shot dead, a grand jury also accused him of robbing 2 homes in July of that year, including one in which a 19-year-old woman was raped.
The grand jury returned indictment against you.
Zachary didn't match the description of suspects in either case, but witnesses picked him out in a lineup after he was told to wear a bright yellow jacket that his lawyer says made him stick out like a sore thumb.
It took me actually a while of studying the pictures of the live lineup, which are all in black and white, to piece together that the only time he was picked out was when he was wearing this very long, ill-fitting, light-colored jacket.
Beyond improper witness ID procedures, Young said police botched the investigation in myriad other ways. A few weeks after the July 3rd robbery and rape, police arrested a man for illegal possession of a billy club. The man matched the description of a suspect in the July 3rd robbery. He was also found wearing silver rings, just like the ones reported stolen by the rape victim. After 2 witnesses failed to pick the suspect out in a lineup, police cut the man loose, without bringing in the rape victim to try to identify him or the rings on his fingers.
The police not only released this man, but they returned the rings to him that the police thought were stolen property. So this is just a massive lapse in police procedure that is unexplainable.
In 2020, Young interviewed the rape victim and her date from that night, who now lives in Corfu, Greece. Those conversations revealed even more problems with the police investigation.
They both said that the assailants were masked and that they couldn't have picked anybody out. And that fact that the assailants were masked is not in the police report. And I asked them, did you tell the police that? And they both said, of course.
Even more troubling than any mistakes made by police was the legal representation Zachary received at the time. According to his present-day lawyers, Zachary told his public defenders in 1974 that he had nothing to do with the robberies and rape that occurred in July of that year, but they told him that he needed to plead guilty to those crimes anyway if he wanted to avoid execution.
What Zachary was told is that if he went to trial, he was certain to receive the death penalty. Now, we know that that's wrong.
That's Patrick Murray, an attorney with Keeker Van Nest, who worked pro bono with Young and the public defender's office to get Zachary's convictions overturned. In 1972, the California Supreme Court ruled capital punishment unconstitutional, 2 years before Zachary was indicted. And although that ruling would later be reversed, Murray said Zachary's lawyers should have told him there was nothing certain about the status of capital punishment in California at the time.
Those opposed to capital punishment call it a tragic failure, a symbol of terror, cruelty, and irreverence for life. Those in favor see it mainly as a deterrent to crime.
Murray also faults Zachary's former public defenders for making no effort to build a defense for their client.
They did little else other than glance at the police report and then process him through to tell him that he needed to plead guilty. It doesn't seem like they did sufficient legal research. They did not do any factual investigation.
In 2020, Young was at Zachary's sister's house when she found photos of her client at the Alameda County Fair on July 4th, 1974. Those pictures supported Zachary's story that he couldn't have been involved in the Ellis Street rape and robbery on July 3rd because he spent the whole night getting his hair curled at his mother's house.
I had to roll his hair. I had to perm his hair and roll his hair because he wanted a curly afro, but his hair was down to here.
Zachary's sister LaDonna had agreed to style her brother's hair in exchange for him driving family and friends to the fair the next day. LaDonna remembers the night vividly.
He was in my mama's house with me and my girlfriends, getting his hair done, playing cards, drinking.
Idea is to take out all the kinks in the hair and give it a permanent straightener.
LaDonna says it took 5 hours to straighten and curl her brother's hair. Zachary went to bed at midnight and drove the family to the fair at around 7 the next morning. Young says Zachary's public defenders would likely have found more evidence to support his innocence had they put in the effort to look.
I'm sure that if they had done their work in 1974, Zachary would have been able to produce an alibi for both of these robberies.
Zachary's present-day lawyers also interviewed 2 suspects who are believed to have committed the robberies that Zachary pleaded guilty to. One of the suspects wouldn't admit he committed a crime, but confirmed over 3 interviews that he was at the Ellis Street home on the night of July 3rd, 1974, and that Zachary was never there.
What he said was, I never at any time committed a home invasion robbery with Zachary. He was never with me. And the second thing he said was, I was there. He said that multiple times in the apartment where my crime partner messed with the woman.
In 1974, Zachary's public defenders also let an outside private attorney with a clear conflict of interest get involved in Zachary's case. The attorney, Edward Bell, represented David Carter, the 16-year-old minor who Zachary claims shot and killed Alan MacArthur during the Fell Street robbery. That was the same crime for which Zachary was being prosecuted for murder. Despite Bell's obvious conflict in the case, he told Zachary's public defenders that he was a family friend that wanted to help, and he attended private meetings with Zachary and his lawyers.
When Zachary started saying, well, I don't know if I want to take this deal, the private attorney started berating him and using very ugly language, told him that he had to be a man, he had to accept this deal, that he was putting great stress on his mother.
Patrick Murray interviewed one of Zachary's former public defenders, who said he wouldn't soon forget the extraordinarily intense exchange.
The public defender now, who went on to have a great career as a public defender, said that this memory was burned into his mind, that he has always thought of this and would never speak to another human being like this. He remembers the effect that it had on Zachary, that Zachary put his head down and didn't say anything until he later pled guilty.
Bell was also present when Zachary entered his guilty plea in Judge Claude Parasso's chambers in December 1974. Young said Bell never should have been allowed to be in that room.
That man should have been kicked out of there. What are you doing here? Why are you even here? Why are you talking to Zachary Vanderhorst? Your client is a suspect in each of these offenses. How is it that 3 sworn members of the bar could sit there and think, no problem?
A different judge dropped the murder charges against Bell's real client, 16-year-old David Carter. Carter would go on to commit 3 more murders over the next 8 years, for which he served 10 years in prison and 2 years in juvenile detention. Meanwhile, Zachary, who killed no one, spent more than 45 years behind bars. Zachary said he didn't realize until after he pleaded guilty how badly his public defenders had wronged him.
I didn't figure it out until I was in prison, everything that had happened. And they just walked me through it like they just fed me to the wolves, so to speak. They called it railroading. They railroaded me and sent me to prison, telling me, he'll be out no matter time. First they gave me the Youth Act, 6 months of life, took that back, gave me 7 years of life. Said, he'd be eligible for parole in 7 years. 46 years went by.
Zachary endured inhumane conditions during his time in prison. In the early 1980s, he was serving time at a state prison in Tracy when a levee broke, flooding the prison with storm water and leaving inmates without running water or electricity for months.
The used bathroom, it was vile. It was like, they had you dumping in a bag and throwing the bag out the window. It was. I done been through some bad stuff, and it'd be freezing cold, and even the blankets and stuff that you got on yourself trying to warm yourself, they wet. They just as wet as the environment that's around you. The water was like, it was black, sort of like, and you got a choice, either drinking it. They weren't selling bottled water and stuff like that. It was like either drink that or you just, you'll get to the point where you will drink it. You can smell it as well as see it. so you just gotta, boil it a little bit and, hold your breath and take a drink and then, push it on down.
Zachary says he never gave up hope that he would get out of prison one day. He went through 17 parole board hearings, each time hoping he might win his freedom. But because he maintained his innocence, his requests for parole were denied each time.
In reading Zachary's parole board hearing transcripts, you just go through basically what I can only describe as a Kafkaesque nightmare. Zachary was so consistent over the course of 17 board hearings that he was not present at these other 2 robberies and was not involved. And no matter how consistent he was, they would just repeatedly say to him, "We're not here to retry the facts of your case. You pled guilty, and your denial of involvement shows that you lack insight to your commitment offenses and lack remorse."
After California's felony murder rule was changed in 2018, Zachary asked the public defender's office to help him apply for resentencing under the new law. That's how he connected with Rebecca Young and Patrick Murray, the first lawyers to make him feel like they really believed in him and were on his side.
When Rebecca and Young come into my life, it was entirely different. They could see what I'm trying to say. From then on, it was like, they just turned into my dream team. Everything was like, right.
Zachary's petition was granted in 2020, and at age 64, he was finally released. This past December, a judge overturned the last of Zachary's wrongful convictions for robbery and rape. I asked Zachary what it was like when he finally walked out of prison as a free man. He said it felt strange because he'd grown so used to people telling him what to do. He had difficulty accepting that he can now make his own choices.
It was a good, cold feeling. But also, I wasn't quite sure. They say you act like you scared to move. I said, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do.
When Zachary walked out of prison, his sister LaDonna was there to remind him that he doesn't need to be afraid anymore.
He was scared. He walked out, I'm going to tell y'all the truth, because it was at nighttime. We got him on the side of that door. He said, "I'm scared." I said, "What you scared of? You got us." He said, "No, it's just the atmosphere is just weird. It's scary to be walking out free in this air." I said, "Well, brother, you free. Thank God Almighty, you free."
In the United States, nearly 3,000 people have been exonerated since 1989, according to the University of Michigan Law School's National Registry of Exonerations. That adds up to more than 25,600 years lost from people's lives.